Billy Carlson is a famous conspiracy theorist that pretends to be a biblical scholar. He has successfully misled many people into believing his lies about the Bible and Christianity, that is, until he met Wess Huff, an actual biblical scholar.
When you say that it denies the crucifixion or that the crucifixion isn't there, I mean, I can go on right now, Codex Sinaiticus, and I can look up the end of Matthew 27.
Where was that piece
I found
discovered?
the text where I was referencing. Actually, I was misquoted. I misquoted there. It's the Gospel of Barnabas.
It's a known forgery. I mean, no one's referring to the Gospel of Barnabas as anything other than...
If you say it's a known forgery and you're expert, I'm going to go with that.
That discussion didn't go very well for Billy, and I'm not the only one who thinks so. So does Billy, which is why he went to the moderator's house in the middle of the night to try and stop him from posting this video online.
We do not go to each other's house at 2:29 a.m. dressed up like that, holding a letter. Not okay to show up at 2:29 a.m. at my house, terrifying my teenage daughter.
Now that was pretty bad, but it only gets worse from here, because then he sends a cease and desist letter to Wess Huff in order to try to stop him from sending any clips of this discussion.
Billy Carson is attempting to sue me. Billy does not want you to see those clips.
Unfortunately for Billy, his plan completely backfired. Because he tried to silence this discussion, everybody took an interest in it, and it spread throughout the internet like wildfire. Almost every single big Christian podcaster started to talk about it, until it eventually reached one of the biggest podcasts in the world, the Joe Rogan Experience podcast.
Word for word.
Word for word.
Wow! However, seeing how a Christian scholar got a lot of attention online, the atheists and skeptics just couldn't sit still, and so naturally, many different critiques have been posted since then. Now, just to be clear, Wes did make some mistakes, but are the reviews justified? Do they portray his position accurately? Stay around to find out. Now, before I get into the critiques, there is something we just have to talk about. How do we portray somebody's position accurately while critiquing them? Is this glass half full, or is it half empty? No matter what you say, technically, you will be correct either way. Both of these statements are factually correct, but they don't sound the same. If you say it's half full, that is a bit more optimistic. If you say it's half empty, that's a bit more pessimistic. But is either one of these the actual full truth? Well, no. The correct answer is neither optimistic nor pessimistic, but realistic. The glass is both half full and half empty. But if instead you choose to focus on only a part of the truth, while being technically correct, you can portray the message in an either pessimistic or optimistic tone. This is something you would like to avoid, so keep this in mind when watching the rest of the video. I personally find atheists to be especially guilty of such bias, and this can be clearly seen when they are portraying the problem of evil. This is how it tends to be portrayed. Oh, look at all the suffering in the world. Look at all the children with cancer. Look at all the deaths. Every single animal that has ever lived has already died. Almost all species have gone extinct, and we live on this insignificant little rock in the massive universe that is completely mindless and barren. Therefore, God doesn't exist. Now that sounds like quite an argument, quite convincing. Notice what they do here. They tend to focus only on the negative aspects of life. But what about all the positive aspects? Most animals enjoy their life for the most part. They enjoy eating, sleeping, and waking up the next day. Most people are glad to be alive, have many aspirations, and look forward to the future. I mean, how could it be otherwise? We could just nuke the whole planet and be done with all suffering, but we don't do that. So clearly, there is more joy than there is suffering in the world. Furthermore, the universe is wonderful. Yes, it's big and empty, but it's beautiful, and it's something we get to explore. It's like a massive sandbox for us to play with. And therefore, God doesn't exist. Now, you see, that doesn't quite cut it. The only reason why it sounded convincing in the first place is because it focused exclusively on all the negative aspects of life. Now, you could argue the individual points I said, but you get the gist of it. You can't just cherry-pick information, which is either positive or negative, to support your view. This is why we cannot exclusively focus on the facts. We also have to focus on this subjective side of things. We have to make sure we have an accurate total representation of the thing we are trying to comment or critique. But why is this the case? I think this is because when we speak, we would like to convince somebody to accept our point of view. However, when we listen, we don't think about people cherry-picking information. We treat what people say as an overview of the whole. And that's why if you portray negative information, the automatic instinct that we have is to treat that as the entire truth, and this is where the misunderstandings come from. So, let's get to some critique. Here are some clips made by Alex O'Connor, one of the most famous contemporary atheists.
Like I said, this isn't true for all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but one of the things that shocked them about Isaiah was that it was word for word identical to the Masoretic text.
Word for word.
Word for word.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that would be amazing if it were true. In fact, the Dead Sea version of the Isaiah scroll is not quite identical to the Masoretic text, that is, the one that we know from the Bible. Can you guess how many textual variants there are between the two? Take a guess. 1 that Wes forgot about? 10? 100? Try more than 2,600. Yeah.
Wow, over 2,600 textual variants. That would be impressive, if they were significant.
Now, most of these variants are small. They're differences in spelling, for example.
Right, so as Alex said, most of these are quite insignificant. Then why did he decide to emphasize that point so strongly? I wonder.
But some of them are more significant. For instance, in Isaiah chapter 2, the end of verse 9 and all of verse 10 are simply missing from the Dead Sea version. They're just not there, which tells us that they were a later addition.
Okay, so really, here is the main argument. There are some significant differences. Now, let's see what they are.
Here are some words from the Digital Dead Sea Scrolls project by the Israel Museum, which houses the Isaiah scroll. Strictly speaking, the number of textual variants is well over 2,600, ranging from a single letter, sometimes one or more words, to complete variant verse or verses. Well over 2,600. Again, many of these variants are minor, but Wess Huff told Joe Rogan that the scroll is word for word identical with the Masoretic text.
It was word for word identical to the Masoretic text.
Word for word.
Word for word.
Which is simply not true.
What you can do is just go to Google, type in the Isaiah scroll. It's going to be probably the second link from the top, Great Isaiah Scroll, right here. And this is exactly what Alex O'Connor was looking at. And you can see this is where it says about the 2,600 variants. And the important part is here. Let's look at the big textual variants that Alex mentions, which are the second half of verse 9 and verse 10. Do they really matter all that much? Well, we can actually go ahead and check. If you just keep scrolling down, if you wish to compare both versions, please click here and you can check for yourself. So we can go into this, go to chapter 2, and here we go. Verse 9 and verse 10. We can see that it's missing. Oh, do not forgive them. As well as go deep into the rock, bury yourself in the ground, before the terror of the Lord and his dread majesty. However, if we take a closer look at this, what is this text actually about? If we read from the beginning, we can see that it's about God's judgment of the nations. Indeed, you have abandoned your people, the house of Jacob, because they are filled with practices from the east and are soothsayers like the Philistines. They shake hands with the children of foreigners. So basically God is just being very angry with Israel. And then we go to the next verse. The land is full of silver and gold, and there is no limit to the treasures, and the land is full of horses, and there is no end to the chariots. So it's just calling them rich, but the land is full of idols. They worship the work of their own hands, that which their own fingers have made. So God again is angry. And then we keep going. But humanity will be humbled, and the mortal brought low. And then what does this actually add? Again, it looks like God is just expressing his anger. Oh, do not forgive them. Go deep into that rock, bury yourself in the ground, before the terror of the Lord and his dread majesty. Okay, but if we just continue, what does it say next? And the haughty looks of humankind will be brought low, and human pride will be abased. The Lord alone will be exalted on that day. So really, theologically, what difference does this line make? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The second half of verse 9 and all of verse 10 doesn't add any real deep, significant theological difference to the text.
So, there we go. Even this major theological difference adds absolutely nothing significant to the text. This makes me wonder, if this textual difference is classified as significant, what are the other significant differences like? Whether the second half of verse 9 and 10 were in the text or not, I don't think that would change absolutely anything about the main message that Isaiah was trying to portray. Now, to Alex's credit, what Wes said was a mistake. The Great Isaiah Scroll is not word for word identical. Now, I know that Wes didn't mean that literally, but nevertheless, I don't think he should have said it that way, because that just creates a little bit of confusion. I myself wasn't actually quite sure what he meant by word for word initially. Now, I did think that it was most likely not exactly word for word, but that does create confusion for some people, and it leaves a space open for the critique to come in. So yes, that was a mistake. But why would you focus only on that mistake and not look at the overall picture, where in reality it is effectively, practically, almost word for word identical? After that debate, after seeing the critiques, Wes even made a video explaining exactly why he said what he said, and he admitted that this was a mistake.
To summarize, was my hyperbolic statement to Rogan a dishonest attempt to pull the wool over Rogan and his audience's eyes? No. Was I participating in disingenuous and underhanded apologetic tactics to try and gain points at the expense of truth? No. Should I have been more careful in my statement on Rogan about the Great Isaiah Scroll and used much more precise language, something to the effect of nearly identical rather than word for word identical, in order to not bring unnecessary and unfortunate scrutiny upon my discussion with him? Yes, but I hope you can see why I said what I said, and forgive me for my lack of precision. Discussing the intricacies of textual criticism to a general audience is not always easy, and in the course of a 3-hour podcast, conversational style, pulled off the top of my head on this big platform, I was not nearly as accurate as I should or could have been in this instance. I'm going to make mistakes and misspeak, and I'm going to do it again. Do not hold me to a standard of perfection, because I am not going to live up to that. I will fail that standard.
Now, this is everything that Alex said about the word for word mistake, but what kind of message does that convey to you? When you watch that whole clip, does that portray to you that Wes didn't articulate his point properly, or does that portray to you that Wes made a massive error or that he was trying to be deceitful? I think most of the people that would watch that clip would think the latter, and that's exactly the problem. If that is all you focus on and you don't go and look at the overall picture, you will portray the wrong message. But it doesn't end there. Now, that's just a small part of the whole video, and I'm not gonna comment all of it because it's quite long. If you want, you can go and watch it yourself. But I can tell you straight away that it had a very critical tone throughout the whole length of the video. Now, just to be fair to Alex, he doesn't usually do this. Most Christians think that he's actually one of the most fair and respectable atheists out there. However, this video was not one of these cases. So remember, the glass is neither half empty nor half full. It's both.